Start recording. All right, got it. All right, now get back to that one. Turn that off. All right, there we go. Well, good morning. Welcome to the monthly meeting of the Seattle Robotics Society. Here we are in the month of June already. Good grief, half the year is practically gone, huh? Crazy. I'm coming to you from Seattle today, so I happen to be in town here came in town for a week to visit my sons and catch up with some friends and other things here. So it's kind of nice to be back in Seattle, although that icky, messy gray stuff you have out here is not something we're used to in Idaho. It most of the time it doesn't rain or it's sunny, so it's definitely brings back memories before we moved. So there we go. There's the June 2023, and I'm gonna go in case so the agenda that we'll follow today will kind of be our typical agenda. We may or may not. I may or may not hang around for the discussion after the meeting at the end. I've been invited by one of my sons to go bike riding today, so we'll see how that works out here. It's a couple of hours from now, so we'll see if the rain stops by then, and we can actually go and have a somewhat dryish ride. At least if it's not coming down out of the sky. That's not so bad with the ground is wet, but I prefer it when it's not actually raining. So anyway, we will. I'll walk through some of the other items in the agenda here as we move along. I think if you haven't already done so, please mute your microphones unless you are actively sharing, and that way, if there's any noise or anything like that in the background behind you, it isn't going to kind of jump in the middle of the meeting there. So appreciate everybody doing that. And oh yeah, and that kind of reminds me to, I'll have to, when I switch my, need to switch out my, get the chat window open, because it's good to have that open on your screen there so that you can see questions and comments and links and other things that people throw up there, and do that. Something comes up, or if somebody mentions something and a link for more information, post it in there, and then that gets included in the post that I do on the websites after the meeting. So anything and everything that's captured in there will be available to you sometime this coming week when I get the video will be uploaded to YouTube, and then the chat will be on the website, and then the link to the video on the YouTube. So let's see, nothing new in terms of movement on the first Washington Fieldhouse location as far as starting up meetings. It's since I no longer live here in Washington, this is something that others will have to coordinate. So the general plan is that at some point, hopefully here this year, the in-person meetings will start up. You'll be able to visit this place. Take a look at take that address and Google it. Google will plant you in the access road that's right outside there, 72nd Avenue, and then you go east from 72nd Avenue, probably about a block or so, and the first field house is the next to the last office on the right as you go into this entrance. It'll be I believe it's I think it's building A, and building B will be as you look down this this access way. And so you want to just drive in there and drive almost all the way to the very back, and then you'll see the sign on the front of the office labeling the first facility on the right. So our plan is to continue doing these meetings on Zoom, even when we do resume in-person meetings, so that those of you who join us remotely will continue to be able to do so. And then my plan is to continue scheduling presenters, updating the website, that sort of thing. So and possibly running the meetings. Although I will have some, may not have some availability here this coming year. So we'll see how that works out. It's helpful if there's anybody out there that would be willing to assist running these meetings as facilitator, basically doing what I'm doing. I usually put the slides together and everything, so it wouldn't require putting any of that together. It's just a matter of starting up the Zoom session and then running these meetings. That's something that not very difficult to do, and be greatly appreciated to have a pool of people that I can call on to be able to take care of this when I am not able to. So if you can do that, just ping me at the Seattle Robotics Society email there at the bottom of the screen. I would greatly appreciate that. And kind of mentioned this here that we'll be doing the streaming. There will probably be some logistics and other things that will be required at the facility to kind of help make this work. So whoever is going to be doing that locally then will probably need the assistance of maybe one or two people to just kind of help get equipment set up and operating. And it might be necessary to have people run cameras and that sort of thing to be able to see what people are sharing. And we haven't really worked out all those details yet. So anyway, again, just ping the Seattle Robotics Society email. That's something that you can help us out with. There have been a few recent events. Kind of curious if anybody has anything that they would like to share or report on some of these events. I know they did the PopCan Challenge here last month. And it was actually, I think it happened at the beginning of the month. So we did have a little bit of sharing about that. Any other events that anybody would like to share about? Nope, no takers. Some of the things that are coming up, there's a, let's see, RoboMaster NA, I don't remember what NA stands for. Coming in July, there's an event that's going to be happening down at the hub at the University of Washington. And there are other events that I think it's called I believe it's, let's see what the website says here. I think it's robotevents.com is that second link. You could find out about things happening all over the country. Robo Games, it's events that happens down in California. And then the Snowco Makerspace folks, they meet regularly, and they do occasional events there. So anything else that anybody wants to mention? Okay. Let me see here. Robothon. Let me see, looking to see who all we have on here. Okay, let me pull up I can pull up some notes about that. I trust you guys are hearing me, right? Somebody chime in there, just
Yes.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. It's just completely silent here. I'm going, I hope I'm not just talking to a wall here. So, all right, thank you so much. Let me see. I got an email from Lloyd. We had a Robothon meeting here just this last Thursday. So I'm going to pull up Lloyd's notes about what all transpired. All right. So let's see. There's good registration and signups for everything except line maze. So if you're kind of curious about the contest, so if you go to robothon.org, you can see a list of all the various contests. And I'm not sure if you'd be able to see if Donna has how many people are signed up for each contest, but you can see what contests are going to be offered. So it sounds like probably everything but line maze. Says Donna is changing the strategy for advertising, concentrating on announcements at meetings and direct emails. So she's involved with a number of business groups and forums and other things, and so she's been broadcasting on those kind of venues to drum up interest in our contests. Let's see. Lloyd is still kind of working with the folks at Sunnycrest Elementary School there to kind of get details nailed down. There were questions about having Wi-Fi access and things because this is going to be on the weekend, and it sounds like none of that will really be an issue. So.
Hey everyone, and welcome back. Today we're going to be showing Casey Airplane for the first time. She just recently watched Naked Gun. I personally had seen both of these films, but Casey watched Naked Gun by herself. But I wanted to join in here for Airplane because I really enjoyed this one a lot more than the Naked Gun. And I haven't seen it since I was a kid, so I'm pretty excited to kind of see what I missed.
All right, what do we got?
Your head sometimes. I feel like there's going to be some things here.
Yeah, I'm also definitely going to be continuing the Naked Gun, the second movie, the third movie. I've been getting a lot of recommendations in the first.
Somebody's got something going in the background. Is that you, Muhammad? Yeah, I'm looking at who's not muted. Oh, and there's Randy.
Not a lot of comedies out nowadays.
Ah, there we go. Thank you. I know, that's why I encourage everybody, if you're not actually sharing, do make sure that your microphone is muted because stuff can pop into the background. So okay, there we go. Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't realize it was open.
Yeah, I know. I just found myself in the same situation. Yeah, it says it's kind of subtle, your little microphone down in the corner, and if you got it full screen and you have some kind of a control panel on the bottom of your screen, it can even obscure that. So okay, so anyway, back to what I was just sharing about. Let's see. Lloyd and Donna have actually visited the facility, and they said that it's pretty nice. So they're pleased with the offering. So I think it'll be good. And of course, this is going to be the first in-person event that Robothon event that we've had since 2019. Does that sound right? So definitely long overdue. I miss them. So don't know for sure whether I will be in town that weekend. If I'm in town for sure, I plan to be there. So let's see. Okay, yeah. So they're going to do another visit in August, kind of a final walkthrough. And then the build out version 1. Okay, and then Donna has been kind of revamping the Robothon website, so I'm thinking that that's coming along pretty well. They're essentially moving it to a new web host, because she wants more she needs more capability. She's running basically the free version of WordPress for creating websites, which is extremely limited. And I have a paid version for the SRS website, so I can do just about anything with it. And there's all kinds of things that she can't do because of that limitation. So she's been working on migrating that, and I think that's coming along pretty good. And looks like, yeah, so their next Robothon meeting will be the end of July. So if there are any updates in the meantime, stuff will show up in on the website or possibly on the group list. So, all right, let's see here. Any questions or anything from anybody regarding Robothon? Okay.
Not a question necessarily, just excited for the event to happen.
Yeah. Okay, good. Glad to hear that. Yeah, it's it'll be interesting to see how it goes in a kind of a less public venue. We've had them at the Seattle Center for a lot of years now, and we get a lot of just casual pass through traffic there. Sunnycrest Elementary, of course, it's a school, public school, so it's open, but it's not necessarily a place where lots of people would just be there incidentally. So there'll probably be I don't know what the plans are. Actually, I haven't heard what the plans are for just kind of getting word out to the general public about that, and try to drum up as much of traffic. But I don't know if we'll try to get some kind of posters or advertising, out there. Probably be good to get advertising. If anybody can think of any good places to put it, if you go to the Robothon website, it has all the specific details about the event. But I mean, anywhere you can think of that seems like a good place, get the word out, let people know. September 9th, and I'm guessing, I'm thinking it's a 10 to 4 or 10 to 5 type of event, maybe something like that. So maybe I don't know if it starts at 9 or 10. I don't remember. Presenters, I still have a good list. Robert Kellogg has been just constantly feeding me suggestions. So as I have opportunity and time myself, I've been shooting out invitations, and so that seems to be working pretty well. Got almost have this year filled, but anybody comes to mind, if you go somewhere and you see somebody that sounds like they'd be interesting to our group, get their contact information and pass it along to me. Maybe if they happen to be in some distant location, you might just go and do a time zone check. If they're not in the United States, some other part of the world, just check the time zone difference between where they would probably be coming from versus Pacific time, and see if it's if that's a reasonable thing. There's not too much of the planet where it would be a little complicated, but if necessary, we could temporarily shift our meeting time to accommodate a special presenter, and we've done that once in the past. So, if that happens to be the case, maybe mention that to me in the email. So again, just send an email to the SRS Gmail account, and any details or information that you think would be helpful as far as lining that person up. So open forum discussions, not sure when we'll actually have an opening for the next one, because I've got presenters booked pretty much most of this year. We might possibly have a discussion on one of these topics to fill one of those slots. I think it's just November and December of this year are the only 2 open spots left. So, but I generally prefer to just get a presenter in there if possible. And so I offer all of the slots that we have available to presenters when I send out the email. I actually give them a list of the dates, so it's very easy for them to look at their personal calendars and see if they can fit us in. But it's always also possible that we could fall back on one of these if a presenter is unable to make it to the meeting. So we might get into any one of these, and we just have a kind of a general discussion. And it's always an option for anybody in the group to lead this discussion on this. You don't have to be an expert on the topic. Just go do a little research, maybe find some websites and videos that have some interesting information, and then we just kind of launch into a general discussion. So here's what we have today. The tentative, ignore the tentative. I didn't pull that out of there. I should have. We do have a presenter here today. I would have to, let's see, I'm not sure if they are online yet. Let me see. Looking through our, oops, stop that. Okay, I don't see them just yet. So, but I do expect them to be there by the time, probably around 11 or so, around the time that we'll present, get them going. So let's see, get back to my, so Dr. Goldman will not actually be able to do the presentation today. He's just the personal issues that prevent him from being able to do it for us. But he found a couple of his former students, postdoc students, who were willing to step up and talk to us about the CRABLab at Georgia Tech. And so they will be on later. So looking forward to that. I don't know if how many of you have seen looked at some of the videos and information on the website. It's pretty cool stuff that they're doing there. So looking forward to that. And as you can see, there's lots of open spots down the road. So I'd love to fill those with interesting presenters and presentations. So keep that in mind. And then post-meeting virtual robotic discussions, we might or might not do that. Kind of depends on interest, the weather. Since I like to go bike riding today, but if it's still pouring rain, that might be motivation to just continue to sit inside and talk robots, at least for a while. So with that, that's all the agenda stuff that I have, and I'm going to let's see here. Zoom. Oops, get this back. Where'd it go? Get back to there. Okay. Oh no, there you got my ugly mug there. Let me. So anybody have anything interesting that they would like to share with us, show us, demonstrate? Got a good group on here, so it's like, okay, surely there's somebody out there that's been working on something just terribly interesting that they've just been chomping at the bit to share with everybody.
Well, I've got something. It's not very robotic, but it's still fun.
Okay.
I recently found out about an app that's available for the iPhone. It's called RetroForth. Now, Forth is a language that's been available since the 70s, I think. It was written by a guy that needed to control his telescope. And it's a language that is a good candidate for running on a microcontroller, where you're going to do your coding on the microcontroller, not on like a PC or something, and download it into the microcontroller. Because it's a very simple language. Instead of methods or subroutines. They just call them words, and you just string them together, and it's a stack-oriented virtual machine, and you can just write code that the code you write you can consider to be part of the language for you, and just keep writing words. Well, this particular dialect of Forth is called retro, and he's made some serious changes to the words that you use, but it's still Forth. The thing I like about it is that I can code on my phone, and I don't use social media, so it's something for me to do on my phone while I'm waiting for something to happen. And I've had a lot of fun. And one of the things I found recently is that it has full support for Unicode. And in fact, when you make a character string in RetroForth, each of the characters has a 64-bit value. It uses 16-bit Unicode, the original, UTF-16, I guess you'd call it. But it has access to the two character extensions so that you can get to the full Unicode. And one of the things I found recently is that all of the emojis are there. So if you wanted to do something with emojis, that's available. And the thing I've been working with recently is I found that the Braille character set, all 256 Braille patterns are there. And so I'm using that to do graphics because it gives you, 2 dots wide, 4 dots tall in each character spot. Now I'm hoping that I will find at some point a way to get adjacent characters to be next to each other close enough that it doesn't look like they're separate characters. But even without that, I'm having fun. What I'm trying to do, there's an example that comes with, well, there's a whole bunch of examples that come with it, but one of them is Game of Life. And I've been interested in Game of Life for many years. And so their Game of Life just uses 1 character per cell. So I'm making an updated version that does, what it would be, 32, is that right? Because I can get 8 characters in a 64-bit word, and each character has 8 cells in it. So 64 characters. 64 cells per character, basically. And I've been able to write code in RetroForth that will retire 64 bits at a time, basically 64 Game of Life cells per word, and using the logical, and or and not functions. I can instead of calculating 1 cell at a time, I can do 64 at a time. So I've been working on that update to that example. So anyway, I've been having lots of fun with Unicode and just writing code. It's a fun language. Of course, you have to learn the language, and learning RetroForth isn't going to help you that much it'll a little bit, but it's quite different from Forth. So if you're already interested in Forth and do want to learn in dialect, it's not the best. The biggest plus on it for me is that I'm running it on the phone, and I didn't have anything else to do on the phone except use it for calls and email and
worthless things like that. Yeah.
Right. Well, it's a phone, so that's when, I've always thought it was odd that we were doing things other than phone on a phone, but so if I'm sitting in a waiting room or something like that, I can just pull out my phone and code in RetroForth. It's fun.
That's probably one of the most unique things that people, if you're sitting somewhere and you're working on your phone, because most people are probably playing on social media or something like that, and it's like, what's Doug doing? He's programming in Forth.
And the dock is available in the app. So you just install the, you just go to the Apple, or what do you call it, the App Store, and look for RetroForth and install it. It's free. And and it's available on other platforms. It just happens that they ported it to actually, it's interesting. I'm still trying to figure this out. The dock is about a 32-bit version of Forth. So I mean, it's called retro fourth, but they describe it as a 32-bit. Apparently, whoever ported it to the phone just went ahead and used the 64-bit environment, and so that means my 64-bit Game of Life wouldn't run on a 32-bit fourth. I'd have to futz with it to well, of course,
Right.
you need character set access too, and there's hints that there's some sort of graphics available, but I haven't found it yet. So that's why I've been playing with the dots, the braille.
Huh. Well,
That's the thing about fourths is that every single fourth is ever so slightly different from every single other fourth. The famous saying is that, you know, when you've seen 1/4, you've seen 1/4. So there's like no standardization from 1/4 to the next. I mean, a lot of times like the basic stuff will run, you know, from one to the other. But yeah, there was a standards body for fourth, I think, and I think one of the most hilarious things about fourth history is that the standards body had this deep schism and divided into two competing standards bodies. If there was ever a perfect commentary on the fourth language, that was it. I mean, just perfect. But it's a great little language. The trick is it's like everybody writes fourth. They write their own fourth from the ground up, which is what's wonderful about fourth, is that you can do that, right? But then then they grow to a certain point, and then you can't like depend on somebody else's code to run on your fourth. So it gets to a certain point, and then it just kind of like peters out. Anyway, sorry, my little philosophy of fourth.
And retro fourth is quite a serious change to the original fourth repertoire. For instance, dot is not defined. There is no dot. In fact, in retro fourth, it's something like n:\put. So it's quite a different dialect of fourth, but it's still fun.
Wow.
Just to be clear, I think everybody should learn, not learn fourth the language necessarily, but like learn how to write a fourth. I think that's a really cool thing to learn, and then the next thing would be for everybody to learn how to write a Lisp, because Lisp is a super simple language and it's really worth learning how to write.
Threaded interpretive language is still in print. That's where I learned it.
Huh.
Every now and again, I run into somebody selling a copy, but I don't know if it's still in print. That used to be, you know, like how you learn to write your own fourth.
I think I learned from Byte magazine.
Oh yeah.
My collection of by the way, complete collection of bytes all the way up into the 90s when I stopped.
Impressive.
But yeah, there was some good stuff in there. And then the other one was, at the risk of committing a heresy, there was a book called The Fourth Bible, which I think is kind of hilarious because that implies that there's a fourth Quran somewhere. Anyway. Sorry.
Well, fourth Old Testament, right?
Oh yeah.
There is a version of a boot language. I'm trying to remember what it's called. It's not. Is it U-boot, or maybe it's not U-boot? But there's a, you know, there's
it was for the Sun. Sun had it.
Yeah, Sun had it. That was actually, it was like you booted the thing up to fourth, and then it was fourth stuff that loaded. It was like basically the BIOS, I guess, was written in fourth.
Which is good because the clock battery would always die, and that's what you needed to do to reprogram the MAC address to allow it to network boot.
Yep. Actually, do people remember that PostScript, the printer language, was basically fourth?
And
the
PDFs are PostScript inside. So literally, PDFs are fourth. If you go through and decompile a PDF, you get PostScript, and if you look at PostScript, it's fourth.
Yep.
As a matter of fact, fun story, there was a guy who it was a university professor, and he was doing, I think it was some form of simulation. He needed parallel computing. He needed he really wanted like a supercomputer with like multiple cores, sort of, so that he could do these simulations faster. And so he put through this request to the university and fought for it, and it got turned down. And then he realized this was at the time when like the HP LaserJet, not the 4, but like the 5SI, which was this huge network printer, and then they had like HP 8000s and 9000s. These were like big network printers, and they would print PostScript as an option. And so that meant that the processor on the printer was running a general purpose language, and they were connected to the network for the university. So he wrote a program that did his computations on all of, it was in a huge university, so these printers were everywhere, right? So he wrote this distributed computing platform, and all of the printers started like getting hot, and they were like slow printing jobs and running out of memory and all this kind of stuff. But
Apple's first laser printer was the same way. So, but the only problem was that your output had to be in the form of printed pages.
Oh yeah. This was actually a critical point. I remember, because he was saying that one of the things was that there was a HP had a settings language where you could tell the printer things like, I want this job to be pulled from this tray, and then I want you to staple the output, and I want you to collate it, and I want you to do all this other fancy stuff, right? And part of that language was that the printer had the ability to respond with what peripherals were installed, like I do or I don't have a duplexer, I do or I don't have multiple output bins, I do or I don't have a stapler, right? And so he was getting the answers back by reconfiguring the printer in the language and sending back a response, which was causing problems. If one of his jobs crashed or something and left the printer misconfigured, then a printer that did have a duplexer might be reporting that it didn't have a duplexer, something like that. Actually, I think he implemented a different device or something so that it didn't do that, but it still, if the jobs crashed, there was some other reason why it wouldn't go on. I think it used up all RAM or something like that. I gotta look that up, because I read it and I was dying laughing.
Well, I was using them for doing actual graphics because they were more powerful than any of the machines I had access to. So it was the same kind of thing. You would say, here, do a supercomputer's worth of graphics, and it would grind away for an hour or two and then print out the result. It helped that I supervised some of the labs, so I could go in way early before it was open, start the job, and then it would be done before the lab opened and anyone else wanted the printer.
Terry James is asking in the chat, do you have to raise and lower the fence in this version of Forth? I guess my answer is I don't even know what a fence is, so apparently not.
On the medical product I was working on, they protected the code by having an object called a fence in Forth that you had to lower the fence in order to make changes to the code, and then raise the fence again. And I thought it was built into Forth itself, but it could have been simply an implementation that they used to protect the vital code on the instrument I was working on.
That reminds me of, so this version of Forth has a dictionary, which I think is probably pretty common to versions of Forth. And it has a way to make words private. They developed a couple of words, double open brace and double close brace, and then something called, I even forgot the name of it, but there's a word that you can take some code, enclose it in these braces, and then put a bar in the middle that says everything above this bar is only available to the stuff below the bar, not to the outside world. And the stuff below the bar is in the normal dictionary tree. So basically what they do is have a separate head to the dictionary. The way that the dictionary is set up in Forth, the most recently created word is at the head of the dictionary, and it points to the next one and the next one and the next one, all the way back to the original word. So if you decide that you want to make your own version of a word that is slightly different from an existing word, you can do that. And that word has access to the ones before it, I think. But I haven't tried doing that, but that's one of the things about Forth.
Wow.
And Forth, there are no keywords, there are only words, and you can create, if you wanted to write your own version of Forth, you could start with an existing version and just write your own version that calls the existing version. And then you can forget about the existing version if you want to use your version.
So that reminds me of Lisp, because Lisp has these two very, very commonly used words, CDR and CAR.
Car and cutter.
Yeah, car and cutter. And I mean, me and a lot of other people have always thought those are completely stupid names, right? Like, why didn't they call them, first and rest, or
They were machine instructions on the IBM. What the hell was it?
Yeah. That was the instruction name. Or
yeah,
whatever.
contents of address register and contents of data register.
But just this idea that, like in Forth, you make the words be whatever you want them to be, but there's no standardization. Everybody has to start from the ground up. And then in Lisp, somebody settles on car and cutter, and then there's a standard and people can build on each other's code. But you have to put up with the fact that some idiot way back when chose car and cutter, right? And I guess there are versions of Lisp where they've used other words, but it's just the
Lisp
comparison.
also had that schism, right? They had the common Lisp people and the interlisp people, and there's like a whole history of threads of people splitting off and rejoining.
Wow. So can I show you guys a video I stumbled on here? I don't know whether any of you have seen this one, but it's a drone that can swim underwater as well as fly.
Yeah, I've seen a little bit of video on that. It's really fascinating.
Let's see here. Okay, I gotta get this thing up where you guys can actually see it. Let's see. Come on. Do that. Come on.
I'm thinking of the flying sub in what was that called?
Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea.
Yes.
Yes. All right. So what I have to. Oh, bye-bye. Let's see here. Okay, share.
a portion of this video.
I wonder how they make sure that all 4 of the propellers are out of the water when they want to take off.
Well, you saw the guy standing there with the remote control, so it's obviously controlled by a person. So I wonder, they just have to kind of, well, thing must have could it have slightly positive buoyancy maybe, so that it floats to the surface and you get all 4 of the props at least kind of are on the surface, and then maybe they have to just kind of start spinning them until it lifts itself a little bit and gets clear of the water.
That's true. They do propel, so even in the water, so you can run them slowly until maybe you can measure the resistance of each motor. So as soon as all 4 motors don't have resistance from the water, then they can spin them up and take off.
I thought that was oh my goodness, what in the world? I got a bunch of, good grief, I wonder what all that is. Got a bunch of text that's landed on top of my my slide here. That is weird. I have no idea how that happened. So I thought that was kind of an interesting.
I've seen video of another version. It may not be by the same inventor. That's an actual sexy sellable product. Where the robot dives from the air into the water and then motivates around and then launches again.
Yeah.
So they've taken it a long way.
Yeah, I thought that was pretty amazing, and I love the way the extra servos on the on each of the rotors, and it allowed them to actually rotate them into a horizontal, so that this thing could swim. They could turn them all the same direction to get the robot to move in one direction, or can probably, I suppose they must have had some way that they could make it where it could like rotate or spin in place and things like that. So
I thought it was cool that they could afford all of that extra weight to rotate those. They may be really geared down so they can only move slowly or something, so you can have a small light motor to do it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You'd want to do that anyway, because you want to have a high gear ratio there, so that when you stop the motor, it'll stay put, right? The high gear ratio would prevent it from inadvertently rotating when you're not wanting that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So let's see here. All right, I got another one here. All right, now let's see if I can pick this guy up, and no, okay. I guess I have to do it this way. Oops. Oops, I'm gonna get all right, get the sharing thing going here. There we go.
Robots are getting pretty sophisticated these days. They can swim, chop, even lift weights, but moving over rough surfaces or unstable terrain still seems to be something most robots cannot do. But it's something animals can do really easily, which is what inspired Daniel Goldman. He's created a robot that, as you can see here, can do what should be impossible. So, Daniel, how did you get your robot to move so well in the sand?
Well, this is a robot that we created to act as a physical model of some of our organisms that we study. In particular, a long-legged, long-toed little lizard that runs around in the desert southwest of the United States. And we're really, in this study, focused on how we can begin to predict and understand why certain leg shapes act well when the robot is trying to move across sand, and how some don't allow the robot to move well at all.
I'm looking at your robot's legs, though. They don't look too much like lizard legs. They look sort of like concave C shapes. Well, how did you come up with that shape?
Right. We don't necessarily want to mimic the lizard's leg shape. In this study, we're really interested in discovering the principles by which different shaped limbs allow robots, and one day to try to apply that to the principles that allow animals to move.
So what about your robot is inspired by lizards then?
Very little of our robot is inspired by lizards, other than the fact that the robot's legs move in a cyclical manner and interact with a granular material. We think of the robot, again, as a model of any organism, which allows us to really get at the principles of limb-ground interaction when that ground is a granular material that can flow and solidify underneath footsteps.
But surely, I mean, those lizards are better on the sand than I would be, for example. So is there something about the way those lizards compare to other animals that inspired you?
Well, in fact, that is a good point. The lizards that we have studied are, in fact, champions of desert locomotion. They can go over hard ground using their long toes. They can go over very soft sand. And so, inspired by their performance, we want to try to understand why the particular limb and feet shape are so good. But to do that, we had to take several steps back, no pun intended, to really begin to understand just the general principles by which complex shapes interact with ground like granular material.
So how does your robot compare to, say, a tank with its treads or the Mars rover with its wheels? Is it better?
Well, it's hard to say. In terms of numbers of body lengths per second that it can move, I'd say it's quite impressive. But at this point, it's hard to make a direct comparison. We hope with our new pterodynamics, the theory and models that allow us to compute the performance of different devices, including wheels and leg devices, we can get some systematic understanding and comparison of these different modes of locomotion.
So Dan, this is a pretty exciting piece of technology, because the whole world isn't paved and other planets aren't paved. How do you see this being applied? Are the next Mars rovers going to have little funny curved legs?
Well, you'll have to ask NASA about that, but we think that that using our pterodynamics, our system to understand forces on arbitrarily shaped intruders, can help designers create effective limbs for different variety of granular material.
Well, thanks so much for talking to us, Dan.
My pleasure. Thank you very much.
I hope I didn't steal too much thunder from our presenters there. That was Professor Goldman, who was going to present to us, and a little bit of a taste of what his lab is working on. That particular video was from quite a while ago, so it's not especially new, and it would be interesting to see what the newer things that have been since then, but it kind of fascinating research that's happening there in the CRABLab, and so that's a little taste of what's to come, and I'm sure we'll get a lot more good stuff. So I think I will probably. Well, let's see. So this is probably a pretty good time to take our break, and I will. I'm just going to chat a bit with our presenters. So let's see here. I'm going to get to the.
Hello. I believe I'm one of the presenters.
Oh yes. Okay.
How are you?
And let me just give me one quick second here. I got one more slide of just kind of general info, and then I kind of release everybody to take about a break here. Probably it's a little after 11. So
Sure.
just a reminder, everybody, there'll be the same link next month, and the meeting recording will be posted on the website here this coming week. And check back on the website for upcoming meeting details and information, and do help me find presenters. And so with that, I am going to go ahead and let's see. I wonder if I gotta, yeah, I think I gotta, I have to get my, share the screen before I switch to full screen mode. Otherwise it won't let me do it. There we go. And I'm gonna share. We'll get back to that. All right. So with that, let's make it about 10 minutes. So about 10:58, you can see on the screen there. So about 11:08 per the screen time, and we'll get started then. So thank you, Dennis, for coming. And let's see, are there more than one of you there at the on?
First off, thank you for having us. I believe Tianyu will be joining, and maybe Baxi as well.
Okay.
So I will talking more about like robots on granular media, and they'll be talking more about these undulating robots.
Okay. All right. That sounds wonderful. Yeah. So we're looking forward to that. So yeah. So we will start that up here in about 8-9 minutes or so. So you could go ahead if you want to go ahead and share a screen to the meeting. Sure. I think you should be able to just override me by doing that. Go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah, just go ahead and put it up there, and
but
as long as
you gotta stop or like allow me to.
Do I have to? Okay.
Yeah,
I wasn't sure if you could. I wasn't sure if it would let me.
Actually, it asks me to continue. Should I go ahead?
Yeah, go ahead and do that. We'll just make sure that. See if it's.
Okay. And
yeah. Okay.
Hope you can see the screen, the right one, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay. How about this?
Okay, that looks great. Okay, why don't? Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and put my slide back up again, and then I'll knock it down maybe a minute or two before I have you go. So everybody's kind of got the time. So okay, it looks like things are working good. So we are really looking forward to what you have to share with us, and thank you so much for joining us.
Sure, it's a pleasure.
Yeah. All right. So I'm going to go back here. Let's see here. Share that. Give me an opportunity to run to the restroom quick here. So, all right. All right, so we will continue on. So go ahead, Dennis, go ahead and reshare your screen there.
Oh, hello all.
Hi there. So welcome. Thank you so much for filling in for Dr. Goldman. He was telling me a little bit about some of the issues there with his wife, and it's sad to hear that it's been hard for her, but I'm so glad that you guys are able to step in. And so let's see, they got yeah, so why don't you maybe just introduce yourself and your team, and then we'll get rolling.
Sure. So hello all. Again, thanks for having us. I'm Deniz Kerimoglu. I'm a postdoc at Goldman's lab, and we basically work on, as you've seen in the previous video, work on robotic limbs or like complex structures which interact with granular media. Also like with unstructured environments, which is like in daily life you don't see too much because lots of money has been poured into paving the way for cars to go from A to B and stuff like that. But for like if you want to do extraterrestrial research, exploration, or like survey and this kind of stuff, you need to get the robots out to the field where there is no structure at all. So this is like the main objective of this lab, Goldman lab. And granular media is especially like one of the toughest surfaces that actual robots are like failing most of the time. And we're developing gate strategies, robot limb shapes, morphologies, to actually enable robots to traverse such environments. And specifically, I'm working on granular media, and my friend and colleague Baxi, as well as Tianyu, they're also working with more like snake-ish robots, which can undulate with and without limbs, like centipede, snake, worm, these kind of robots, which can make their way through a really cluttered environment. And we have a specific method of doing research here, and I'll be briefly talking about this. And sadly, Dan is not here for today presentation. So about his wife, he's actually like mostly discreet about his wife's condition. But as far as I'm concerned, I think it's all about kidney issues. Hopefully, it's gonna get better in the following weeks or months. Yeah. So, and if you are back to our topic, so the locomotion on granular slopes is the topic of my talk today, basically. And we have various collaborators. We work actually with Google Robotics, Google Research in this particular project. And we collaborate with JPL on some other projects. And Dan has just recently founded a company which basically is intended to, I think, to work on fields like for agriculture purposes and stuff. So yeah, so if you don't have any particular questions, I'd like to proceed with the presentation. I think that's a go. Okay. So as you probably like briefly had a taste of such media, so these granular environments basically has two different responses based on the force profile that you apply. If you like be gentle on such surfaces, they are more like solid. I mean, you probably have experienced this by yourself when you're trying to walk on sandy slopes on like beaches and stuff. But if you apply a lot of force, like jump and all this kind of jazz, then it is more like fluid. So it cannot hold it cannot create enough resistive forces to support the interacting stress and stuff. So it's really due to this multi-phase feature of such media being solid or fluid-like, depending on the force you apply, it's like really challenging to locomote on such media. And in addition to this, especially slopes, like even for like extreme slopes, like sand dunes and stuff, even small disturbance can generate avalanching downhill flow and such complex behavior. And that further poses further complications. And unfortunately, there is no predictive set of equations like Navier-Stokes in fluids or like hard contact in rigid surfaces. So unfortunately, there's like very limited things that you can do if you want your robot to kind of like conquer this landscape, these very unfriendly landscape. So the approach that we are pursuing is called robophysics. So I believe there are lots of engineers out there listening. So this is a bit different than an like regular engineering approach, where actually I'm also an engineer. So where like basically what engineers do is like optimize for a specific goal or like given a motivation, right? So here we actually do not want to optimize for whatever cost function we have. We actually want our system to fail frequently so that we can learn from the failures a lot. So, and this approach is basically called robophysics. You want to understand the interaction physics of the robot limbs, robot body, intruding bodies into these complex media, which is granular media. So we systematically span and investigate variables instead of trying to optimizing them. So, and as Dan's lab has shown over the years, successful robotic and biological locomotives actually modulate their gait behavior to tap into this multi-phase feature, which is solid and fluid-like response in their flowable substrates. So, which basically means that the locomotor is coupled to its environment. They're like independent entities. They're more like a merged entity. So, and again, engineering perspective is like make robots robustly function despite their environment, just applying lots of feedback control, lots of sensing, and lots of optimization techniques. However, we just try not to do that, but just we aim to collaborate with the environment and fail a lot and learn from the interaction. That's the robophysics approach that Dan's lab is actually pursuing. And yeah, so our motto is like robot failure is often more interesting and useful than robot success. So we use this approach as a scientific instrument to just understand the underlying interaction physics with the soft matter, and also help develop better robots. So that is like the primary. If there is a key message, that's the key message of this this presentation. So I already mentioned two distinct features of such media, of granular media. And to actually tackle that issue, we over the years, our lab has developed two distinct approaches. First, solidification of such media on such slopes. So the idea is actually to maintain solid contact through appropriate interaction and body lift, and try to avoid all this avalanching behaviors by just actually engaging with the terrain in an appropriate manner. And the other approach actually is to fluidize the flowable media, as you see on the bottom. That there is a rover, a small rover that our lab is just like working on for I think 5-6 years, just to tap into the fluidization aspect of that material to create selective fluidization of the material via the appendages using unconventional gates. So I was talking about the first approach, but if I have more time, I can also pitch about the second approach that our lab is working on. So let's just start with the solidification of granular slopes. Again, I was talking about robophysics model. So you see a snake, like climbing up the granular slope here. So our lab, like I think a decade ago, developed a similar robophysics model, which is not a perfect robot, but it's good enough to mimic the basic fundamental gates and complexities of a snake, of an actual snake, basically. So, and what happens basically here is that by having large contact area as a function of slope angle, this robot was able to locomote up until like 20 degrees. Another study was done on like this tail guy here, mud skipper, and this also investigated the effect of fins and their depth, insertion depth, as well as the effect of the tail while it was like trying to so the effect of such limb interaction with the granular media as a function of slope angle. So the main idea is to actually try not to make a mess of the ground, so that the response is is as solid as it gets. So get the most solid response out of that flowable slope surfaces. This is the actual solidification approach. And as you see, sidewinding snake robot actually it increases its contact area when ascending those sandy slopes to stay below the sand's yielding stress. So actually that allows it to generate a more solid-like response. And for the mud skipper, it utilizes to slipper it's actually flipper's fins and coordinate the tail movement to solidify the granular media and then propel its body upwards. So this is like the all just on the actual solidification process. However, as I mentioned, these robots like were only able to do like 20 degrees of slope and only uphills, and they have limited limb utilization in which that they actually have your bodies all the time most of the time in contact with the media. Even though they're trying to solidify it, they were not actually able to do it very properly. And we were asking this question, can we do better and alternative way of pulsating limbs for slope solidification to ascend and descend the robot? So we were after this question, and then we just switched. So I inherited a robot which was in the lab before, and then it was a bipedal robot. And then why bipedal robot? Basically, it's just like it's a basic idea is like it's very constrained, and it can be so easily unstable, but it could be also so useful in these very constrained environments where you can do actually exploration, search and rescue as well as construction. So since also it's like very close to human morphology, anatomy actually, it allows to it's a good platform also to work with humans. So let me just dive briefly into bipedal world a bit. Basically, bipedal walkers like previously you probably know Asima and such robots back in like 2019 or something like that. So they basically walk like with their knees bent, and they walk in a static quasi-static regime where the center of mass projection, vertical projection, is always within the support polygon of the support foot. So this is okay, but this just kind of like generates slow motion, as well as it's not very energy effective. Now lately with Boston Dynamics and a bunch of other researchers, actually they're now the robots are now becoming more and more dynamic while they're actually walking. There are a bunch of great studies out there. So like as a comparison static case, basically stability over speed and agility. However, dynamic case, their speed and agile, however, their stability is not that great actually. So as I told you, this dynamic walking is great. However, it is all good with rigid contact where you know the reaction forces quite well and you can predict under some assumptions. But the issue is on these flowable slopes, high-speed ground contact with the media actually leads to instant fluidization of the media. Instead of being more solid, high-speed contact makes them like more fluid, and then it cannot generate, the terrain cannot generate enough response so that sinking, slipping, and tilting is like the generic behavior that you see if your robot is like too fast on such media. So, and also most of these robots nowadays has lots of sensors embedded, and they just use feedback control, bunch of feedback control methods. And however, again, the assumption is that the ground reaction forces is like predictable to a certain degree. And since the equations are lacking or like very, very rudimentary on such environment, actually, the phase transition as well as the phase transition between solid and feature actually hinders using feedback mechanisms on flowable slows. So based on this like very brief literature review, actually, we rely on open loop gates and we rely on quasi-static gates to make the robot walk on these extreme granular slopes. These are the basic reasons. So previously our lab members found worked on various ways to understand what happens when you're like on granular media. So you see, like, for example, if you're like on a rigid media and if you have a like foot of this rectangular dimension, you basically, the ground reaction force like is all effective around this rectangle. However, when you switch to granular media, even on like level without any slope at all, you just have like very limited range of stability. So our previous lab members, so this is the robot, by the way, on the left. So just have the robots walk on slopes, like say effectively 5 to 6 degrees, in which that they actually like slip backwards almost half of the cycle. They can walk about like 10 degrees slope, but again, they like slide fail like 80% of the time. So I inherited this robot and then made some modifications and also used these principles a bit. And this is the robot, the final version of the robot. So basically it's quite like a small robot in the lab. So like 40 centimeters, it's quite lightweight, and we use basically dynamic servo motors. And what we do is we just connect those servos using 3D printed links. And we use poppy seeds basically to model these sand-like surfaces, because it's a good analog to model those sandy particles. We cannot directly use sand particles, because once they get into your actuator, just blows your actuator. But these guys, poppy seeds, if they like end up in your actuator, they basically like grind up to oil. Basically, they don't harm your actuator. This is the basic reason we use poppy seeds in our lab. And we just put this robot on a full dice testbed for to just do perimeter sweeps, basically, which is a robophysical approach that I was talking about. And so a bit of issue that I had while I was trying to learn using that robophysical approach was basically this: the center of mass, like on rigid slope, like there, you can predict that, give or take, right? So for a single step. But on granular slope, since you kind of like yield unpredictably, you actually, it's really tricky to determine your center of mass position, especially as the slope gets onto extreme levels. It's like almost impossible to determine the center of mass, so that you cannot really design a gate, because you just tilt all the time continuously. And next step is, even if you kind of like can assume and generate a step, if you like take a step, so in a rigid surface, that's okay. But on a granular surface, if you just kind of like cannot determine your center of mass properly, you kind of like shove your foot into the granular mass, granular media, and then like that generates a lot of reaction forces, which is actually, again, leads to tilting and falling behavior. So then I designed a gate structure which actually allowed me to keep the center of mass regardless of the terrain slope, right at the vertical projection of the ankle, so that regardless of the slope I'm walking, so I'm not tilting backwards, or like in forward or backward direction. No matter what I do, actually, I just use the zero moment point, I alternate the 0 moment point such gate such that I don't even just tilt a degree at all. And then after I place my foot successfully at the second image here, I can then propel my body at the double support phase. Because I now have 2 contacts, I become even more stable. So this is a simple figure of the the progress of the robot on slopes from -20 to +20. Minus is downhill and plus is uphill. So it's like previously, like the robot was like failing a lot, even at 10 degrees. Now I'm like, I think it's quite okay on 10 degrees. And I kind of like, I make the robot walk on 20 degrees without just like flat foot. There's nothing at the foot level. But no matter what I do with this kind of gait that I developed, I keep slipping down all the time because of the gravity. So the friction between the 3D printed flat foot and the granular media, basically puppies, they allow you actually to stay straight up until 90 or 20 degrees. Other than that, no matter what you do, for steeper slopes, basically you just like slide down. So that was an issue. And then just turning back to actually soccer, and if you remember like these cleats for the soccer shoes, we actually are inspired from these sharp objects or like sharp structures that engage with the terrain while walking. So we were asking the question, can we use similar structures to engage with the media so that we don't just slide down? So we first take a bunch of plates and then inserted them into the granular media and then measured its reaction forces, first intrusion resistance, as well as drag at very extreme slope, 30 degrees. And then we just analyze this data by changing the spacing between these plates. So you see, there is a specific, like, there is a specific design of these sharp cleats, sharp plates for the soccer shoes. We want to actually understand what is a good spacing for our robots that will actually allow us to climb in a better way. That was the primary question we had. And so we can skip this one. So we just 3D printed a bunch of plates, which has different, starting with a single plate here, which has 0 spacing. And then we just say 1, 2, 3, 4 until 5 centimeters different, 5 centimeters spaced plates, and then we intrude and drag them. So as you see, actually to sum up here, so if I can generate lots of traction force, lots of drag force with less intrusion resistance, I can place my plates properly without creating a mess, just solidifying each footstep during the foot contact, so that I don't yield. The robot actually does not slide down. That was the basic idea. So we found that approximately like after 4 or 5 centimeters space plates, we were able to actually create really good cleats, if you will. So then we just placed them. This is a 4 centimeter apart spaced cleats, as you see. Now, not only I can walk better on slopes from -20 to +20, I can now even walk at like very extreme slopes, like 30 degrees. And the performance is not that bad, like I fail like 40%, but I can make my way like 60% for these kind of extreme terrains. So we did some more analysis, and then we just changed the space between those leads, basically. And so as you see, let me just play these guys here. So too much of a cleat, too much place actually did not generate a good result, and too less also, like the diagonals here, 2 centimeter versus like 24 centimeter, they were not real good. Like 50% slip of all time, of like I think 12 or 14 steps. I was really getting to like less slip. The robot was like getting better performance if I can space them like optimally in a good way, in which that at least 4 centimeters apart here, as well as enough traction, enough place so that it gives me enough traction to just climb up such terrain. So again, the idea is like make and break contact without creating lots of mass, without yielding exiting use stress, as well as create tractive forces so that it supports the center of mass progress for uphill locomotion.
So Dennis, got a question from Terry.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Terry.
Yeah, I was wondering, your plates in the previous picture were squared off in that image. I was wondering if you had tried curved plates.
I did try various shapes, I would say. But the easiest one in terms of understanding it was these kind of rectangular straight plates. Maybe with like more. Okay, so if you also have like curved plates, they also tend to bend, right? And we don't know how bending is affecting. So it's a good question, but we didn't try. We would love to, but it's really not straightforward to try those stuff, because now you have to get into material selection, material properties. But with these straight guys, actually, we don't really care much, because it's like they don't bend a lot and they're like straight in. And then with this kind of density and like we can easily sweep the parameters with these guys. But it's a really, I think that holds a real like a good merit for future endeavors, I guess.
Did you also try varying the depth, that is the length of each little plate?
I did try to change the vary the depth, but what happens is, like, briefly, I didn't show it here, but it is good that you go as deep as you can go, because just like if you just be on shallow levels, you can still create tractive forces, but as I can show you here, so the direct forces you can get as a function of depth actually is a quadratic function, which means that you can get like exponential forces if you go deeper, and you want to go deeper. Yeah, so going deep is good as long as you do not mess around, you do not create lots of force while you are actually going deep.
You're basically going as deep as the height of your gate.
Yeah, I actually modified the gate so that it kind of like pushes them at a specific rate,
right,
and at a specific distance. Yeah, depth actually. Yeah, so I have more slides, but I think I should stop here because I also have we have also Baxi and Tianyu to present their great robots. And
There's
I think
Dennis, there's another question in the chat there. Do you have the chat window open on your?
Now I'm looking at it. I think Scott just asked a question. Did you try doing any of this in simulation? If not, why not? That's a good question. I did try. Okay, first off, granular media simulation is nothing easy. So basically, especially on slopes, you have to like the brute force, the brute method to simulate granular media on flowable on like these extreme slopes is like modeling them one by one, like each particle on a particle basis, and you just need millions and millions of particles, just because these are like 1 millimeter diameter particles, and you need to use DEM approach, discrete element methods approach. I did do simulations on intruding plates, but not the whole robot. This is that's going to be a whole new I think avenue, but it's a good question.
Okay, got some other questions for Dennis? Because if not, you have another some more. Your colleague going to present on something a little different there?
Yeah, so I think we have Baxi. So Baxi, why don't you go ahead
Right. I think
Sure.
Tianyu wants to present
I-
first, and
Yeah, I can go next, and Baxi will go after me. All right. Let me start sharing my screen.
Okay, we are seeing that.
Can you all see my screen, or that's my presenter mode?
We're in presenter mode.
Let me.
Yeah.
Give me 1 second. Let me fix this real quick.
Sure.
All right. How about now? Is it good?
Yeah, we're good.
Okay. Okay. All right. Should I start?
Please.
All right. So hello everyone. My name is Tianyu Wang, and today I'm a PhD student in robotics, working with Dr. Dan Goldman in Georgia Tech. And today I'm going to present our work on the mechanical intelligence in limitless locomotion. So undulatory locomotion is one of the most common forms of locomotion seen in the nature. And it occurs across length scales from a very small micros long sperms to meters long eels, snakes, and undulatory locomotion emerges in very diverse environment, from aquatic to terrestrial. And in this work, we focus specifically on this limitless locomotion system called C. elegans, which is a millimeter-long nematode. A generalist can locomote in a variety of environments. And moreover, they can display amazing capabilities of performing very agile locomotion in heterogeneous environments. I'm going to show an example here. So here's a C. elegans locomote on a slice of rotten peach, which is a very rheologically and mechanically complex environment for it. Given these types of animal have relatively simple physiology and neural system, so they have only 302 neurons in their neural system, and we wonder actually how much they have to do in the controls, in the neural controls, to be more specifically, to achieve such locomotion in heterogeneous environment. However, if you can see here in the video, for such natural environment, their rheology is very ambiguous, and they pose a lot of optical challenges for us to observing the worms and analyze their kinematics. So we build a synthetic lab model of such heterogeneous environment, which we call it a lattice. So in such lattices, we can actually change the density of posts, and we also can systematically study their locomotion and observe their kinematics. So before I jump into our results of observing the kinematics of this worm, here's what we're gonna do to study C. elegans kinematics. So here you can see this is a video clip of locomotion, and from this video we're gonna first calculate the body curvature at each time step, and then we're gonna have a curvature heat map like this, so you can see such clear stripe pattern, which actually means the worm is actually doing a traveling wave locomotion. And then we're going to project these body curvatures onto basic sine and cosine principal components, or we sometimes we call it shape basis. So through this principal components analysis, or we call PCA, so that these curvatures at each time step can be represented by a weighted sum of such shape bases. And if we plot the trajectories of such weights, for example, W1, W2 here, we actually can achieve a path in the shape space. On this path, actually every point represents a body shape. And a path in this shape space, like I said, every point represents a body shape, and then a circular path in this shape space actually means a perfect traveling wave. So you can see here, although we have some resolution, small resolution issue that's caused to these corners in this plot, but you're going to see the overall shape of this path is still circular. So this is what we're going to do to analyze the worm kinematics. So here, I'm going to introduce a little bit on the worm swimming performance in open fluid and lattice kinematics. So we studied the body kinematics, like I said, of C. elegans in such lattice with very close densities. So let's first see the very first row. This row shows the kinematics of worm in open fluid, and you're gonna see that while this worm can go forward and it displays a very clear this kind of like diagonally projected stripe shape in body kinematics. And you can also see that there's a very circular shape in the shape space, so that this worm is actually perform a very clear traveling wave shape in this open fluid area. And then if we move to the second row and third row, we start to have these posts in the environments. So surprisingly, you're going to see these worms still actually perform a very interestingly similar locomotion pattern in these environments as well. They still maintain this traveling wave form in such environments. So other than, if you can see my cursor, other than the third row in this dense lattice, you're going to see these patterns of traveling wave actually start to break. And we're gonna show later like why these such pattern could happen. But these results actually shows that no matter how dense the obstacles are, the worms actually don't do too much in controls to avoid collision or react to such obstacles as we might imagine. So this results seemingly to suggest that all they're trying to do is actually simply maintain a traveling wave. So we can see their gate passes in the shape or similar circular shapes. So with this finding, we can say, okay, they have all like seemingly simple controls. And with this observation, we start to hypothesize that there should be a lot of passive mechanics and passive body environment interactions, which we call it mechanical intelligence, actually plays a very important role in C. elegans locomotion when deal with such obstacles. We suppose this kind of mechanical intelligence plays a very good amount of role in such limitless locomotion in such obstacle-rich areas. So where does such mechanical intelligence come from? So if we further look into the C. elegans anatomy and see how they produce undulation, as shown in this figure, they're actually contracting and relaxing muscles on their either side of the body to produce locomotion. Where you can see in this figure, the red area actually shows the contraction of the muscles, and blue area actually shows relaxation of the muscles. And very interestingly, some previous work from our group actually shows that there is very similar bilateral actuation mechanism in snakes as well. And this actuation mechanism actually helps snake to get around such obstacles indeed. And so our research problems start to emerge that how to test such bilateral actuation and how can we systematically study the effect of mechanical intelligence in limitless locomotion. Then we start to look into robots because we want to test such mechanism on the robot to, because these animals doesn't allow you to really, control their muscles or like do whatever experiment you want to try. So a robot is like very naturally a very good model for us to test such mechanism we wanna learn. So this is state of the art of the limitless robot that in the area, and a common point of them is like they all kinds of like serially linked limitless robots. So by serially linked actually means they're having like servo motors or like rotary motors in each joint of the link, so that you can program like what's the joint angle a joint could be, and you can define what kind of shape this robot could take on. And many previous works have defined a lot of closed loop controls and sensings, so they can start to get information from the environment, and then they use such information to start to plan the body shapes so that they can locomote in such environments. However, we are thinking there is something else we're missing in such mechanical design, because you can see from my previous slide that limitless animals usually are using muscles to control their locomotion, but currently these robots are not. So what we're gonna do next is like, instead of this serially linked body actuation mechanism, we're gonna abandon such mechanism, and then we develop a mechanism called cable driven. So we start to drive the joint using 2 cables instead of 1 servo motors at the joint, and we arrived at such new class of limitless robot. And you're gonna see this limitless robot controls or like able to join their joints using cables that lie around each joint. And this is actually a mixture of hard and soft components. And this robot is actually decentralized controlled, and each cable is independently controlled. And this robot actually allows us to implement programmable body compliance, which we're going to introduce later. And more specifically, we're going to use this robot as a robophysical model, so that we're going to test if this open loop model can reproduce the kinematics we just saw in the similar environment that compared to the worms, so that to test like if such mechanical intelligence really have its role in the locomotion. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how we control this robot. So basically, if you want to program this robot, one of the joint of this robot to a specific joint angle, you're going to be able to actuate the length of the cables to make it to rotate. And if you start to program this robot with a so-called serpentine curve, is basically a traveling wave in the body, this robot can actually start to show this undulatory locomotion in terrestrial environments. So one thing I'm gonna mention before I go on is like all environments that we consider in this study is so-called highly damped environments where friction is much larger than inertia. So we don't actually we don't actually consider inertial effects in such limitless locomotion. And furthermore, we have developed a so-called a single knob, so that we can tune the body compliance. So here's some math, but the major point here is like we define a quantity, a variable called generalized compliance G, which this G represents like how compliant the body could be. So basically, if you play around with the body length, like the cable length of this robot, you'll be able to control like how compliant your body gonna be. I'm gonna show some examples here. So I'm gonna skip this, and I'm gonna skip to here. So when you have your generalized compliance value G equals to 0, and this robot is like stiff, so it's difficult to bend in either direction of the joint. All right, and if you start to increase G, the specific point G to 0.5, you're gonna see that this robot is directionally compliant, which we mean that you can actually easily to bend this robot body from one specific direction, but you cannot bend it away from that direction. Of course, if you start to increase this G value much more, you're gonna start to having this robot become more compliant in both directions, which we call it bidirectionally compliant. You're gonna be very easy for you to bend this robot in either direction. So this G is basically a quantity to define like how compliant a robot body could be. So we have a compliant robot, and next we're developing a lattice or like environment which is comparable to worms, so that we can test the robot performance in such environment as well. So on the right hand side is basically like the lattice we built, so the robot can locomote in a similar environment as the worm locomote in. So this is a comparison between robot in its environment and the worms in its environment. So you're going to see how similar they are. And next, we carry out the robophysical models in lattices with varied post densities to test like how performance could change as body passivity changes. So for the ease of compare with worms, we just implement the same gate that worm used in corresponding lattices. In other words, we're using the same amplitude and spatial frequency parameters in the traveling wave we just saw. So here comes the robot performance evaluation. So you're gonna see that the robot gonna move slower if it's very stiff, G equals 0, or it's very compliant, G to 1.5, where only when this G value having a appropriate amount of passivity in the body, you're going to see this robot can actually achieve a very the most like the best locomotion speed. And on the right hand side, you're going to see that it's not only the locomotion speed going to have the local maximum when G is at its intermediate value. Also, we looked at the so-called the mechanical cost of transport is basically efficiency this robot has. So we're going to see that the efficiency of locomotion also have a local minima when G is in the intermediate value, which means you cannot be too stiff, you cannot be too compliant. While you have the right amount of passivity in your body, you're going to achieve the most the optimal locomotion performance. So furthermore, this is a similar comparison, and this is a much more dense environment. So you're going to see the comparison here is more clear. When you have very rigid body, you're going to get stuck in such environment very easily. While if you have a very compliant body, you're gonna need actually some kind of like thrust so that it can progress in this lattice. But if you are too compliant, you cannot actually generate enough thrust allow you to move forward. So in this lattice, it's very similar conclusion that only when you have a right amount of compliance in the body, so you can move freely in such environment. And then if we collected all such performance of robot in this figure, you're gonna see that in this gonna show that when your G value is basically like in the middle level of this range, this body compliance range, you're gonna behave the most effectively in such environment. And if you compare with the worm locomotion, you're going to see they actually share very similar kinematics and performance specs in such environments. And I'm going to show more of detailed kinematics later, but here I just so that you can see like how similar the robot behaves with the worm's locomotion. And In this figure, you're gonna see that how good a robophysical model with G equals 0.75 can actually model C. elegans locomotion. And this actually shows that the mechanical intelligence actually plays a role in C. elegans locomotion in heterogeneous environment without the need of actively controlled tuning. All the results I showed here, the robot is actually having open loop controls. And then I'm gonna show a little bit of robokinematics, but I'm gonna skip a little bit details, but you're gonna see here the robokinematics looks really similar to the kinematics of C. elegans we just showed. And more interestingly, we just see there are some similar passive behaviors that displayed by the robot and the worms. And right-hand side, you're gonna see like how similar their kinematics in the shape phase are, and how their phase plot look similar to each other. And then we're thinking like, if you're gonna see here where the red circles are, the robot frequently gets stuck here, right? But we never see such stuck behavior in the worms. So how to robustify this behavior in the robots? Like how to expand the range of generalized compliance for such locomotion is that effective. So if you look back to nematodes, like why these nematodes never got stuck in such environments, it's very complex for them as well, and they have no prior knowledge to this lattice before they start to swim in such environment. So we're finding actually these worms are able to do some active reversals. So during these reversals, they place the wave backwards a little bit for from half cycles, and then they start to repropagate. That's why you see this traveling wave get broken a little bit, and then they start to propagate again. So we just look into the literature, we find nematodes actually have this tap contact sensing in their neural system, and we're just thinking like, how about we implement similar mechanism in the robot so that the robot actually can detect the force contact, so that we can start to trigger such reversal behavior in the robot as well. I'm gonna skip a little bit detail of how I implement this. I'm gonna show this demo here. When you start to implement this robot with this head sensor, and this robot start to having this reversal behavior, it can start to get stuck very frequently, and then it can start to play backwards locomotion, and then it gets through this lattice without problem. And here's a comparison of active reversal behavior in robots and the worm. You're gonna see they also place very similar kinematics as well. And here's a comparison between open loop robot without reversals and closed loop robot with reversals. You can see that before, for many different G values, this robot cannot work. But later on, you can see for those G values, especially small G values, previously the robot cannot work. With this closed loop controls, this robot start to traverse such lattices with the help of such reversal mechanism. So further discussion of this reversal behavior, it's like why such simple try again strategy could work. So we argue that it's not simply let the robot to repeat, it's actually let the robot's passive mechanism facilitate robot reposition and reorientation during the reversal and repropagation. And this behavior actually creates extra chances to let the mechanical intelligence to find solution to this environment. All right, so here comes my conclusion. First, the several takeaways of my talk will be first, the bilateral actuation mechanism actually facilitates mechanical intelligence, so-called, in biological and robophysical limitless locomotors. And such mechanical intelligence actually plays a very important role in limitless locomotion. It simplifies active controls for effective locomotion in heterogeneous environments. And furthermore, based on the mechanical intelligence, we can actually develop a simple active behavior, which is reversal, so that with limited feedback sensing information calculations, we can enhance the mechanical intelligence so that the robot's navigation capability, you can get robusticified. All right, that's all for my presentation. And thank you all for listening. Thank you all for having me. And I'm gonna pass this to my another colleague, Baxi. All right, thank you so much.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. That's pretty fascinating. Okay, Baxi.
Okay. Hi, everybody. Let me share my screen.
Sure.
I'm Baxi Chong, a postdoc in Deniz Group, and I was a PhD student and looks right now recently graduated and looking for faculty jobs. So today, right now, I'm going to talk about our recent work on multi-legged matter transport, a framework for locomotion on noisy landscape. So this work sort of summarized like how do we compare our approach of robotics to the state of art robotics, like in terms of the use of sensors, the use of everything. So that's like we try to highlight why we need to have all those like redundant joint for snakes or centipedes. So let's start with a matter transport. So matter transport is important in modern communication. However, the most terrestrial matter transport relies heavily on the roads and tracks. So on roads and tracks for the wheeled locomotor, the trains, the cars, it relies on the continuous thrust from the interaction between the locomotor and the continuum. So that would realize the global homogeneity of the roads and tracks. So any like disturbances on those roads and tracks will significantly delay the matter transport. So that's like the first wave for the matter transportation. We have the homogeneous landscape and we have the noisy landscapes, and we can cause some delays. So that's our first way of thinking of the matter transport. Then we look at this like lag locomotions. So this is what we call the bump map from my hometown. So on the uneven structures, this discrete like thrust is preferred because it only requires a local homogeneity at the discrete lag substrate contact. But the question is that it would require the vision. Like for the human to work on uneven terrains, we need the visions, we need the peripheral sight, we need the sensors, we need all the environmental awareness to see the environment and to make the next move. So that's sort of the real-time feedbacks. So that's the bottom panels that we need the environmental awareness or lag locomotion to facilitate effective matter transport. So we are inspired by those hexapod like Rex robots. So these robots can, because of their additional legs, so we don't have to worry too much about the stability. And we're wondering if that having more legs can be sufficient to go from A to B reliably. However, those additional legs for the hexapod is sufficient to counter those loss of stability. However, when the situation is like here, you see that the thrust deficiency from those non-perfect contact can cause the thrust deficiency, which causes the indefiniteness for this arrival time. So that means like if you wish to send a hexapod from A to B, eventually it will get there, but the arrival time is indefinite. We cannot quantitatively predict the accurate arrival time for the hexapod to go from A to B. So based on those observations, we wish to see that, okay, what if we have more legs? So here's a centipede robot, and we deploy the open loop operation of the centipede on those pebbles, and the height variation of this pebble is twice the size of this centipede robot, and seems to be very effective and can conquer those highly heterogeneous environments, which in our control example, the hexapod cannot. And we'll see it can also go through the grasses and the grass again. And here's also the rocks outside of Georgia Tech. And we have some indoor experiments, I think starting here. So here's a wall and the obstacles and the slope and the bricks, and they can make a turn to deviate. And then there's a packs, they can go through the packs and step into this the obstacle reach natural debris, and then make a turn to overcome those granular media. All those controls are open. So this highlights the potential of just use the redundancy in the number of legs to counter the terrain heterogeneities. This idea is quite similar to the signal transmission in Shannon's information theory. So how do we transmit? So here's a brief overview of how do we transmit signals over noisy channels. So here's Shannon's famous paper on mathematical theory of communication. So there are many ways. The first thing is like we have an analog signal. So in principle, the continuous analog signal can carry infinite amount of information, but it can be easily contaminated by channel noises. As you can see that here's the perfect analog signal and the contaminated signal, and it can be easily contaminated. So Shannon suggests two things. Firstly, he proposed to digitize the signal into discretized bits. So having those bits, it limits the maximum amount of information that can be carried per bit, but such limited discretized bit can guarantee have some reliability and robustness. And he wished to, and in his paper, he illustrated that we can have this guaranteed robustness by redundancy. So here's an example of simple repetition. And through this simple repetition and digitalized a signal transmission, so we can reliably transmit a signal from A to B with the error rate arbitrarily close to 0. So that's the unidirection signal transmission. And Shannon also proposed a retransmission that's sort of similar to our feedbacks of environmental awareness. So if we have a reverse channel that it can facilitate the communication between the sender and the receiver and back and forth, we can reduce the number of redundancy required for reliable signal transmission. So that's for very brief introduction about Shannon's theory on information theory. So what can we learn is that we have redundant, we have different codings for information theory, all those frameworks developed. And now we wish to say that, okay, we wish to transfer the knowledge, the insight from the signal transmission into the locomotion, into the matter transport. And how can we guarantee the matter transportation from A to B just relies on the redundancy and not relies on these channel homogeneity and the environmental awareness. So we wish to say the middle panel is also a reliable alternatives for effective locomotion and matter transport. So here's our modeling. So consider the thrust generation of a lag. So if we put a robot down the ground, it can generate thrust by pushing the substrate, either on enough Coulomb friction on the flat ground or on granular media. So it's all like can generate thrust. So we can calculate the nominal undisturbed thrust generated by this robot substrate interaction. So that's the nominal thrust. Then we consider the terrain disturbed. So we introduced a random variable of stochasticity in terms of the terrain disturbed thrust. So having those thrust, we can calculate how much thrust can we generate. Consider all the terrain heterogeneity that we can encounter. So that's the modeling for the thrust generation. Then, so the thrust generation is more abstract concept, and our recent work shows that there is an effective viscous drag in multi-leg system, where the velocity can be reasonably approximated by a linear function of the generated thrust. So in this way, we can we can convert from the more abstract thrust generation to the velocity predictions. In this way, we can predict the effective how would the velocity vary in different systems. So in terms of the redundancy, the first intuitive thought is to have this trial and error, the temporal redundancy, just like the Shannon did in his information theory. We reduce the transportation rate. So if we fail in the first trial, we try it again. If we failed again, we try it again. So the trial and error, temporal redundancy. So here's the formula of what would happen if we have temporal redundancy. We try it again and again. So the second redundancy is more elegant. It's what we call spatial redundancy. So that is like we redistributed the temporal steps into spatial steps. We connect, for example, 2 hexapod to form a 12-leg robot, and we have a more, how to say that, so there's redundancy distributed in terms of the leg numbers. So the advantage of spatial redundancy is that the gravity will do the job for us. So if we experience some disturbance on each individual legs, so the contact loss or the terrain, noises is no longer acting on a single leg. It's now acting on the entire robot. So the entire robot acted as a filter to this robot locomotion system. And here's our numerical simulations for estimated time of arrival. If we compare the 8 pairs of legs and a bipedal robot with 1 pair of legs. So as we can see that with sufficiently temporal redundancy, we can guarantee that we can go from A to B in some time. But the variance increases as the time increases. So that means like, so if we can eventually go from A to B if we only have, for example, 3 pairs of legs, but the arrival time is indefinite. But interestingly, we notice that with sufficient spatial redundancy, we can not only guarantee the completion of a matter transport, but we can also guarantee the punctuality of the arrival. So we verify our framework by our robophysics experiments. We have the robot locomotion tested on those Rugos terrains, and then we tested. Okay, we first show that those contact losses are the primary source to cause the variance, and we also, so here's the key insight. So we have all those from hexapod to 16-leg robot. We have all those robot locomotives on the flat ground, and we record the number of the time required for those robots to reach 60 centimeters. So interestingly, we notice that, so if we are on the flat ground, it doesn't matter. All the robot takes the same amount of time to go from 60 centimeters. And so then what is the advantage of having more legs? The advantage emerges when the terrain becomes more challenging. So here's an example of 4 pairs of legs and 6 pairs of legs and 8 pairs of legs. The 4 pairs of legs, when they're lucky, so they can go really fast in the beginning, but they can easily get stuck there because of the contact losses. So that's, you can see that the lower bar is almost like there, but these, if we're lucky, but if we're not lucky, we are unlucky. So these 3 legs can take up to 15 periods to travel 60 centimeters. And this phenomenon is can be further illustrated when we move the robot on the more challenging terrains, which is we will show later. We will wait until this first one to finish this motion task. And now this even more challenging terrains. So this phenomenon is amplified, and you can see that the time required for a 16-leg robot to travel some distance is more sort of the guaranteed. So the variance is reduced. The lower bars is almost there, but the upper bar significantly reduced if we compare the 8 pairs of legs to 3 pairs of legs. So that sort of shows the advantage of having more legs. So we can guarantee the reliable matter transport, just use redundancy, and we don't have to rely anything on the sensors, on all that complexity of the controls. So it's just open loop and just so complexity transfers from the dealing with the information flow of the terrains. We need to react and reflex to the designing the coordination design, the gate design. So that's the sort of the key message of our current research. That's my presentation for today. Thank you so much.
Come on, there we go. Okay, I get to my mute button there. All right, thank you. So that's everything.
Yeah.
All right, thank you so much. Yeah, that was pretty fascinating.
Thank you.
You guys have spent a lot of time studying little critters. I like the those little worms that you were showing at the beginning. Those are what, like a centimeter or something, or even shorter, smaller than that? Micro.
Yeah. So that's I wish to, if we wish to discuss it more, like, so most of the robots like try to mimic the macro animals like human and dogs and horses. That's very complicated. It's a very complicated neural system. Our robot cannot do that yet. So what about these micro organisms like the centipede, these worms? They're very, very simple controls, but they can still go places. So that's like the principles of our lab is to say that, okay, what we can learn from those little creators and can benefit our robots. So yeah.
Cool. As I was watching your cable, the cable controlled segments, and I was thinking about how if you had 3 cables arranged at 120 degrees, you know, and then a ball joint rather than a hinge joint, you could actually, the robot could sort of move in any direction. Have you guys ever done anything with that kind of stuff?
Yeah, I think that's like more as the current studies. We have the vertical wave to introduce to have this. It's actually very interesting that the vertical wave can help locomotion in uneven terrain, can make it more robust. So having a little bit of feedbacks and that on that, that's like make it this go even more reliable.
I wanted to ask, how do you keep those strings from skipping off the drum that you're reeling that in with? When you let those loose, it seems like that could become a mess. Do you like keep a certain amount of back pressure, like just reduce the force that the motor produces so that you can keep the string taut even though you have compliance?
I think that question is on the cable-driven, tendon-driven robot, right?
Yes.
I can answer this one. So yes, that is a very good question. We had this problem, and we don't actually want add any kind of spring mechanism in such mechanism because we don't want to add any kind of non-linearity to our model, right? So we want to actually keep it loose. So what we do is, if you look at my slides, we have a pulley. Well, with that pulley, we have a little like tunnel like guide so that the loose cable gonna stay in that kind of like little structure so that they won't go like too much anywhere else, like because it can wind around some other structure on the robot, right? And also the amount that we're trying to loosening up isn't that much, so that it will actually stay in place like quite well. So we won't worry too much about like how like loose cables can get around like other structures on the robot.
I'm curious to know whether this is only about progress in terms of forward progress of the robots, or is there a way to steer them? Right, with trains, the tracks steer them. With cars and trucks, a person steers it. With a person, they steer themselves. So once you have these different locomotion systems suitably, developed for use, how would you steer such a robot?
Yeah, I think that's actually a question that applies to both system that I introduced and Baxi introduced. I can answer the first portion of my robot. So in this work, in the comparison to the worm work, we don't actually care too much about the the reorientation or like the turning behavior, because more we care about is like how to use the passive structures, passive mechanics in the body so that you can get around such obstacle-rich environment. However, we do have different kind of turning behavior programmed on this robot so that we can actually steer this robot to go like in any direction that we want. And we actually have a lot of previous work that Baxi and I did so that we can program such specific shapes inspired by worms or inspired by other snakes so that we can enable different kind of turning behaviors on this robot. And Baxi can provide more technical details on those works and also how we do steering behavior on his centipede robot.
Right. Yeah. So that's the other thing that we are so interested in those microorganisms is that those microorganisms are so good at turning with so limited control complexities. So I think the nematode like C. elegans are known for its capability to turn as what they call omega term. The omega term was previously documented, but less work to reconstruct omega term mathematically and tested on robots. I think our work, prior work, is to show that we can decompose, reconstruct those omega term in robots. And it's actually very, very robust and has so many advantages. It's robust on different environments. It has robust to the terrain heterogeneities. So it's very robust and capable for those robots to go places and reorient. And also inspired by those omega term studies on C. elegans and worms, we also can implement the similar turning strategy on the centipede robot, because one thing to think about a centipede robot is to as many legs robot connected together. The other way to think about centipede robots as a snake robot with legs. So it's just like a snake robot with legs can turn as similar as snakes. They can also turn quite effectively. We're using the strategies identified in those worm studies.
Okay. Well, my thought is that eventually, when there are either industrial or other real world robots with either of these structures, not only would you want them to go to some particular place, especially for matter transport, but also you'd want to get them back, right? You don't want them to go for miles and miles and then try to drag them back by a wire, right? Yeah. Ideally, you'd want them to come back.
Exactly. And so that's like a recent work is like our centipede robot can also go sideways, like a sidewinder snakes. So because of the additional legs can brought us more capabilities, like can combine everything. So that's the more sort of the advantage of this multi-leg system.
And I did have one other question, which is, it seems like in both cases, you're using the body structures and tuning certain parameters like the compliance and the number of legs in order to get some peak performance. Is there any evidence that these simple creatures have any sort of short-term memory, to the sense that they can understand whether they're making progress or not and tune, let's say, body compliance or speed of the legs or something like that for local conditions? Do they adapt in that way?
For the starter, I don't think the centipede can choose the number of legs like when they move.
No, clearly not the number of legs, but possibly the speed at which it moves them, right?
Yeah, definitely. Yes, the centipede have antennas and they can have some environmental awareness. Like for example, they know whether or not this legs makes contact or not. So the way that we are thinking is like, instead of having a local reflex, just like a like human do, if we've missed the contact, we just like try fire another reflex and make it to start it over. The centipede did their adaptation as the whole body centralized coordination. So that means like they adapted their overall body coordination in response to terrain heterogeneities. For example, if all those body driven, like every motion is driven by body oscillation, that's high performance, but very sensitive to any heterogeneities. So that's only good when the centipede wish to run fast and or they sense the environment is carefree, it's smooth. But if they notice that they are moving on very challenging terrains, they will switch back to a more stable and lag-driven locomotion. That's very slow, but that's very robust. So they have the capability to do the adaptation, but we hypothesized at least that their adaptation is based on this gatewise. It's not on locally this decentralized system on those individual lags. So yeah, that's I think the slight difference between the centipede and the bipedal system.
Interesting. I had read something at some point about how massively multi-legged invertebrates coordinate their walk, and it always seemed to be a wave. But I'm curious to know whether your team has engaged with any invertebrate biologists to actually see like what goes on in their brains.
Yeah. So what goes on in their brains, that's super challenging problem, and so I think the only recent work that's been doing on this neuromechanical system of the centipede is like back in the 90s. I think Berkeley had a group to study those, to have the EMG to study this, because whether these little creatures have active body undulation or passive body undulation is been controversial for a long time. So some people say that, okay, the centipede undulate their body because they cannot control it. The others saying that, okay, the centipede doing the body undulation because that's good. So it has been controversial about this point. And I think the EMG study to verify that, okay, those body undulation is active, not passive. And but that's, I think, the only work, at least recent work, that we know about the centipede control strategies. But of course, we have the centipede system in our lab, and we wish to work more on with the real biologists on those centipede studies. There's a lot of unanswered question on the centipede biology side. As you asked before, can the centipede change the number of legs? Actually, they do. Some centipede, they're born with 8 pairs of legs, 6 pairs of legs, but they grow number of legs when they're growing up. So the locomotion patterns in those type of centipedes is quite different from the other types of centipede where they are born with, for example, 21 pairs of legs. So their developmental differences and the morphology difference and all the locomotion differences, they are all connected and into different groups. So I think that's super interesting, but has been a lack of study that we are trying to work on these areas.
Yeah, it would be interesting to know whether they have the same underlying adaptation, so that a centipede, which is born with its final number of legs, uses the exact same methods as one that might add legs later, meaning that whatever effective algorithm is being implemented in their brains is robust to the number of legs, at least beyond some minimal point.
Yeah. Maybe like the number of legs, because they were born were so little that they cannot implement those wavy gait because that's unstable and not effective. So I think that's like there's like evolution like these time dependent, history dependent, like on those how this gait evolved. I think that's our current hypothesis that we are working on that.
Yeah, very interesting. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, well, it's about 12:30. It's a lot later for these guys, so I think maybe we'll let them go. Thank you so much for interesting presentations. I would, if you have, I think I saw a link. Okay, there was a link on there. What is that link to? IEEE Explore?
Oh, that's the link that I shared when Baxi answered questions for steering for the robot. So this is a paper that we published before regarding the behavior that Baxi mentioned.
Okay. If you guys could send me your presentations, we'd love to post them. Or if you have if they're online somewhere and you can link to them, that would be fine as well. We'd love to have access to that. Put it on our website.
So by presentation, you mean the slides?
What's that?
By presentation, you mean the slides?
Yes, the slides. Yeah. If that's all right with you, it's if not, that's fine too.
I think prefer to share with you the papers that we publish on this works.
Okay, sure. Okay, so that's everything. Thank you everybody for joining us today, and I hope hope you learned something. I found this to be an interesting presentation, and we will do this again next month. Any parting comments, questions, etc.? Okay, well, with that, I am going to call this, wrap this meeting, and we'll see you all again next month.
Thank you all for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for coming. All right, come here. All I got to do is there it is.